The grand palace of Baghdad stood under a sky blanketed with stars, but inside, the halls were restless. Caliph Harun al-Rashid paced in his chamber, his brows furrowed in deep thought. That night, the mighty ruler had dreamt of a towering tree, its branches reaching into the heavens. But as he gazed upon its beauty, a shadowed figure appeared, wielding an axe. With each strike, the tree shook violently, until at last, it collapsed into darkness. The Caliph awoke in terror. He could not shake the feeling that the dream carried a deeper meaning, perhaps a warning. By morning, he summoned his wisest scholars and royal advisors, demanding an interpretation. One by one, they stepped forward, offering cautious words. "The tree symbolizes your empire, O mighty Caliph," said one scholar. "The axe may be an enemy," suggested another. But none provided a clear answer. Frustrated, Harun al-Rashid dismissed them all, except for one man. Bahlool. Clad in his usual tattered robes, Bahlool stepped forward, unbothered by the tense atmosphere. He bowed, a mischievous glint in his eye. "The great Caliph," Bahlool mused, "fears a mere dream? What a rare sight indeed." The court gasped at his boldness. Harun al-Rashid, unamused, glared at him. "Then tell me, Bahlool, what does it mean?" Bahlool stroked his beard, pacing in slow, deliberate steps. "A tree, strong and mighty, yet felled by an axe." "But tell me, O Caliph, who wielded the axe?" The ruler hesitated. In his dream, the figure's face had been hidden in shadows. "I could not see," he admitted. Bahlool nodded knowingly. "Then perhaps, Your Majesty, the axe is closer than you think." Silence filled the chamber. The words lingered like an unspoken threat, the weight of their meaning sending a chill through the court. The Caliph's grip tightened around the golden armrest of his throne. Bahlool's words echoed in his mind, "The axe is closer than you think." The court sat in tense silence. Had Bahlool just accused someone within the palace? Harun al-Rashid leaned forward. "Speak clearly, Bahlool. Do you mean to say that this threat lies within my own walls?" Bahlool smiled, tilting his head. "The axe does not strike without a hand to guide it, O mighty Caliph. And often, that hand belongs to one you trust." The court erupted into whispers. Could Bahlool be implying treason? A royal advisor, his voice trembling, spoke up. "This is madness. The Caliph is surrounded by loyal men. Who among us would dare harm him?" Bahlool turned, his gaze sharp. "A tree does not fall in a single blow. It is weakened over time, by worms, by rot, by those who pretend to protect it while feeding on its strength." Harun al-Rashid clenched his jaw. He had ruled with wisdom and power, but even he knew betrayal could bloom in the shadows. "Tell me, Bahlool," the Caliph commanded. "If the axe is among us, how shall I find the hand that wields it?" Bahlool grinned. "The one who fears the dream most is the one you should watch." A cold tension settled over the room. Eyes darted nervously. And then, before the Caliph could respond, a sudden commotion came from the palace gates. A messenger, breathless and wide-eyed, rushed in. "My lord, there has been an attempt on your treasury." Gasps filled the hall. Bahlool chuckled softly. The tree begins to shake." Harun al-Rashid rose from his throne, his eyes blazing with suspicion. "Find out who is behind this." Bahlool simply watched with amusement, for he already knew the axe had begun to reveal itself. The Caliph's command sent the palace into motion. Guards rushed to secure the treasury, while whispers of treason spread like wildfire. Bahlool, still grinning, walked slowly around the court, observing the faces of ministers and noblemen. Some looked angry. Others, nervous. The royal vizier, a man known for his calculated words, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, this is a coincidence. A mere robbery. It has nothing to do with Bahlool's riddles." Bahlool laughed. "A robbery? Oh, my dear vizier, I did not say anything about theft. And yet, your first thought is the treasury." The vizier's face paled. Harun al-Rashid narrowed his gaze. Bahlool, are you suggesting that my treasury was not the true target? Bahlool clapped his hands together, his expression turning serious. A wise ruler must ask, who benefits from such a disturbance? The caliph fell into deep thought. If someone was trying to shake the kingdom, then this was no simple crime. It was a distraction. Just then, a guard rushed back into the court, his breath ragged. Your Majesty, the treasury is untouched, but there was an attempt to bribe the captain of the palace guards. The room fell into silence. The caliph's fingers tightened around his throne. Who? The guard hesitated. Then, with a deep breath, he pointed. At the vizier. Gasps rippled through the hall. The vizier's eyes widened. Lies. This is madness. Bahlool simply shook his head. The axe does not reveal itself willingly, O Caliph. But when the wind blows, even the strongest branches tremble. The Caliph's face darkened. Take him into custody. Guards seized the vizier, dragging him forward as he shouted in protest. As they carried him away, Harun al-Rashid turned back to Bahlool. You warned me of the axe. Tell me, is this the hand that wields it? Bahlool sighed. That, O mighty Caliph, is only the first cut. But a tree that has begun to rot has many roots. The Caliph's expression grew grim. If Bahlool was right, this was far from over. And somewhere in the palace, another shadow was already planning its next move. The court was still reeling from the vizier's arrest when Bahlool turned to the Caliph with a knowing smile. O mighty Caliph, you have severed a branch, but what of the tree itself? Harun al-Rashid leaned forward, his eyes dark. You speak in riddles again, Bahlool. If the vizier is not the root of this betrayal, then who is? Bahlool paced the grand hall, his tattered robes swirling like a shadow against the polished marble. Your Majesty, power is like a spider's web, one string moves, and the whole web trembles. Ask yourself, who gains if you lose trust in your advisors? The Caliph's jaw tightened. You suspect there is another. Bahlool chuckled. Not just another. Many. A wave of unease swept over the gathered ministers and noblemen. Eyes darted across the chamber, suspicion settling like a storm cloud. Just then, a second guard burst into the hall. Your Majesty, we found another letter in the vizier's chambers. It mentions a meeting, tonight, in the city's eastern quarter. Harun al-Rashid's fists clenched. Who is he meeting? The guard hesitated. The letter does not say, but it was written by someone with knowledge of the palace's inner workings. A chill ran through the room. Bahlool's grin widened. The axe has more than one wielder, O Caliph. Harun al-Rashid stood abruptly. We will not wait for them to strike again. Tonight, we move in silence. Bahlool bowed low. A wise ruler acts before the storm arrives. As night fell over Baghdad, the Caliph and Bahlool, cloaked in shadows, made their way into the city. The answer to the treachery lay ahead. And the real mastermind was waiting. The streets of Baghdad lay cloaked in velvet darkness, the moon casting silver shadows over narrow alleyways. Cloaked in simple robes, Harun al-Rashid and Bahlool moved like phantoms, their footsteps silent against the cobbled streets. Ahead, a lone lantern flickered in the window of an abandoned house, the meeting place mentioned in the vizier's letter. The Caliph motioned for his guards to surround the building. No one would escape. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of parchment and ink. Figures huddled around a wooden table, voices low, speaking in hushed tones. This is the time, one of them muttered. The vizier's arrest has weakened him. We move before the Caliph suspects. The door burst open. Steel flashed in the dim light as guards stormed in, pinning the conspirators to the ground before they could flee. Harun al-Rashid stepped forward, his eyes blazing. You speak of betrayal in my own city? Among the captives, a familiar face twisted in shock, a member of the royal council. Bahlool chuckled, shaking his head. The web leads back to its center. The courtier glared. This means nothing. You have no proof. Bahlool reached into the folds of his robe and withdrew a sealed letter, one he had secretly taken from the vizier's chambers. He tossed it to the caliph. Harun al-Rashid broke the seal. His expression darkened as he read the names within. Half my court conspired against me. Bahlool leaned in, his voice a mere whisper. Power attracts shadows, O Caliph. You must choose, will you rule in fear or in wisdom? The conspirators trembled, awaiting their fate. The Caliph exhaled, his grip tightening on the letter. Tomorrow, the city will see who stands with me, and who falls beneath the weight of their own greed. Bahlool only smiled. The game was far from over. Dawn spilled across Baghdad's golden rooftops, bathing the palace in soft hues of amber. The city stirred with rumors, whispers of treason and a night's reckoning. Inside the grand hall, Harun al-Rashid sat upon his throne, his expression carved from stone. Before him, the conspirators knelt, hands bound, faces pale. The court had gathered, nobles, scholars, and advisors, watching in anticipation. Bahlool paced the chamber, his tattered robes trailing behind him. Strange, is it not, he mused. Those who plotted in the shadows now shiver in the light. One of the accused, a high-ranking official, sneered. We sought only to guide the kingdom in a better direction. Bahlool's grin widened. Ah, yes, I have heard this tale before, the snake that bites in the dark and claims it meant only to teach a lesson. Laughter rippled through the court, but the caliph raised a hand for silence. He turned to the prisoners. Tell me, he said, his voice measured, what fate would you have given me, had you succeeded? The room fell deathly quiet. The conspirators cast nervous glances at one another, but none dared to speak. Bahlool chuckled. A wise ruler does not seek revenge, O Caliph. He seeks truth. Harun al-Rashid nodded. Then let truth decide their fate. The doors swung open, and scribes entered, carrying documents bearing each man's seal, evidence of their betrayal. The court erupted in gasps. There is no place in my kingdom for treachery, the Caliph declared. Let justice be swift. The guards stepped forward, leading the condemned away. Some wept, others cursed, but none could escape the weight of their deeds. As the last of them was removed, the Caliph turned to Bahlool. You have saved my throne, fool. Yet, you claim no reward. Bahlool bowed deeply. O mighty Caliph, the only reward I seek is to remind you, power is like a candle in the wind. Hold it too tightly, and it will burn you. Neglect it, and it will vanish. Harun al-Rashid smiled, for the first time in days. And that is why, despite your madness, I will always listen. Bahlool only laughed. Then may your kingdom stand as long as you remember. With a final twirl of his robe, he strode out of the palace, disappearing into the city, just another fool in Baghdad's streets. But the wise knew better. The sun had fully risen, casting long shadows over the palace. The conspirators had been dealt with, and Baghdad's throne remained unshaken. Yet Bahlool, ever restless, knew that power's greatest enemy was not treachery but complacency. He found the Caliph alone in his chamber, staring into a basin of still water, his reflection rippling under the golden light. You look troubled, O mighty ruler, Bahlool said, leaning against the doorway. Harun al-Rashid sighed. I have ruled for many years, Bahlool, yet today I feel as though my own throne has become my prison. Bahlool chuckled, stepping forward. Strange. A wise man once told me that a throne is no different from a grave, both demand you stay in one place. The Caliph smiled dryly. Then tell me, O fool, how does a man escape his own throne? Bahlool knelt beside the water basin, dipping his fingers into the cool liquid. You do not escape it, Your Majesty. You learn to rule without becoming its prisoner. The Caliph frowned. And how does one do that? Bahlool raised a single finger. First, by remembering that the throne is borrowed, not owned. A man may sit upon it, but history decides how long he remains. Then he raised a second finger. Second, by ensuring his people love him more than they fear him. Fear keeps men silent. Love keeps them loyal. And finally, he raised a third. And third, by keeping men like me close. Harun al-Rashid laughed heartily. You would call yourself a protector of the throne, Bahlool? Bahlool grinned. A throne without truth is a throne doomed to fall. And who else but a fool dares to speak the truth? The Caliph leaned back, his tension easing. Perhaps you are not a fool after all. Bahlool bowed low. But if I were not a fool, Your Majesty, you would not listen. With that, he turned and walked away, vanishing once more into the streets of Baghdad. Harun al-Rashid watched him go, a thoughtful smile playing on his lips. For in the words of a madman, he had found the wisdom of a king. Days passed, and Bahlool once again wandered the streets of Baghdad, his name whispered in every corner. Some called him a lunatic, others a sage. But those who had seen him face the Caliph knew one thing: he was not a man to be ignored. One evening, as Bahlool rested beneath a date palm outside the city, a young scholar approached him. The boy, no older than 20, carried a thick book and a quill tucked behind his ear. Master Bahlool, the scholar greeted, bowing respectfully. Bahlool raised an eyebrow. Master? No, I am but a fool. Who sent you, boy? The Caliph? The scholar shook his head. No one sent me. I came of my own will. I wish to learn from you. Bahlool chuckled, scratching his unkempt beard. And what, pray tell, can a fool teach a scholar? The boy hesitated before speaking. They say you understand the world not as it is seen, but as it truly is. Bahlool nodded, his gaze fixed on the setting sun. And tell me, boy, what do you seek to learn? The scholar exhaled deeply. Wisdom. Bahlool smiled. Then close your book. The boy frowned. But knowledge is in these pages. Bahlool tapped his own temple. Knowledge is here. Wisdom is out there. He pointed toward the streets, the markets, the people moving about. You wish to understand life? Then do not hide from it in ink and parchment. Walk among the hungry, sit with the broken, listen to the silent. The scholar hesitated, then slowly tucked his book away. And if I do that, will I become wise? Bahlool grinned. You will become a fool. The boy blinked in confusion. Bahlool laughed heartily. But between a wise fool and a blind scholar, I would choose to be the fool. As the last light of day faded, the scholar sat beside Bahlool, listening to his stories, his laughter, and the madness that carried more truth than any book ever could. For wisdom was not in being a master, but in daring to be a fool.